You've heard the term T visa, but every explanation sounds like legal noise. Meanwhile, you're still asking the scariest questions. Does my trafficking experience even count, or will I be pushed back into the shadows? Miss the facts and you risk losing the single pathway that lets you stay, work, and protect your family in the United States. In the next few minutes, I'll break down exactly who qualifies, the evidence that works, and how to file without costly mistakes so you can move forward with real legal status, not fear, and never face your trafficker's control again. Hi, I'm Zaira Solano, founder of Solano Immigration Law Firm, and let me start by explaining exactly what a T visa is because there's often confusion about this particular immigration benefit. The T visa is a non-immigrant visa specifically created for victims of severe forms of human trafficking. This isn't just any crime. We're talking about situations where someone has been subjected to sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or other forms of modern slavery. The Trafficking Victims Protection, which Congress passed in 2000, created this visa category because lawmakers recognized that trafficking victims needed special protection and couldn't be treated like typical immigration violators. These individuals are victims, not criminals, and they deserve a pathway to legal status while they recover and rebuild their lives. To qualify for a T visa, you must meet several specific requirements. First, you must be a victim of a severe form of trafficking in persons as defined under federal immigration law. This means either sex trafficking where a commercial sex act was induced by force, by fraud, or coercion, or if the victim was under 18 years old with no force, fraud, or coercion. For labor trafficking, it involves the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor services through force, through fraud, or coercion for involuntary servitude, peonage, debt, or slavery. Second, you must be physically present in the United States on account of sex trafficking. This means that your presence here is directly connected to the trafficking situation. Third, you must comply with reasonable requests from law enforcement to assist in the investigation or prosecution of the trafficking case unless you're under 18 years old and unable to cooperate due to physical or psychological trauma. And finally, you must demonstrate that you would suffer extreme hardship involving unusual and severe harm if removed from the United States. This is where we look at factors like the safety of your home country, your family ties, your medical needs, and other circumstances that make deportation particularly devastating. Filing for a T visa application is quite complex and it requires substantial documentation. The primary form is I-914, and that is the application for T applicants. But this is just the beginning. You'll also need to submit a very detailed personal statement describing your trafficking experience, which can be emotionally difficult to write, but it's crucial for establishing your case. One of the most important pieces of evidence is what we call a law enforcement endorsement. This comes from a federal, state, or local law enforcement agency, a prosecutor, a judge, or other legal authority that can certify that you've been a victim of trafficking and that you're likely to be helpful in the investigation or in the prosecution of the trafficking case. The endorsement is submitted on Form I-914 Supplement B. However, you can still apply for a T visa even without this law enforcement endorsement if you can show that you've made reasonable attempts to get it, or if you're under the age of 18, or if you can demonstrate that you're unable to cooperate due to physical or psychological trauma. In these cases, we need to build a particularly strong evidentiary record through other means. Medical records, psychological evaluations, expert witness statements, and testimony from social service providers can help establish your case. In matter of MI, the Board of Immigration Appeals clarified that evidence of physical abuse isn't always necessary if there's clear evidence of psychological coercion or control. The application must be filed within 4 years of when you first had continuous physical presence in the United States because of the trafficking. Though there are some exceptions for minors and those who can show extraordinary circumstances that prevented timely filing. Once your T visa is approved, you receive several important benefits. You're authorized to remain in the United States for up to 4 years, and you can receive employment authorization, which means you can legally work to support yourself and your family. This is often life-changing for trafficking survivors who have been completely dependent on their traffickers for survival. You may also be eligible for certain federal and state benefits, including access to services comparable to those available to refugees. This can include assistance with housing, medical care, job training, and other support services crucial for rebuilding your life. Perhaps most importantly, T visa holders can include certain family members in their applications. If you're 21 or older, you can include your spouse and your unmarried children who are under the age of 21. If you're under 21 years old, you can include your parents and your unmarried siblings who are under the age of 18. The family unity provision recognizes that trafficking often affects entire families, not just the individual, and that separation can cause additional trauma. After 3 years of continuous physical presence in the United States in T visa status, you may be eligible to apply for a green card for lawful permanent resident status. This requires showing continued cooperation for law enforcement requests if they've been asking you for it, good moral character, and that your presence in the United States would serve the public interest. One of the biggest challenges that we see with T visa cases is clients don't initially recognize what's happened to them actually constitutes trafficking. Many people think trafficking only involves dramatic scenarios, like being kidnapped and chained up. But in reality, trafficking often happens in more subtle forms of control, such as psychological manipulation and threats against family members, debt bondage, or taking advantage of someone's immigration status and threatening to get them deported. For example, in United States versus Dan, the court recognized that trafficking can occur even when victims aren't physically restrained if they're controlled through other means like threats, isolation, or exploitation of their vulnerability. Another common challenge is the psychological trauma that makes it difficult for survivors to cooperate with law enforcement or even tell their story coherently. Trafficking victims often experience complex trauma, including PTSD, depression, and memory issues. This is why it is crucial to work with attorneys who understand trauma-informed approaches and can connect clients with appropriate mental health support. Language barriers and cultural differences can also complicate T visa cases. Many trafficking survivors come from communities where there's deep mistrust of law enforcement or government authorities. We need to build trust carefully and explain the process in culturally appropriate ways. Trafficking victims often have few personal documents, and their traffickers may have destroyed or confiscated identification papers. We have to be creative in gathering evidence, using everything from medical records to witness statements to social media evidence that might show the trafficking situation. The cooperation requirement with law enforcement deserves some special attention because it's often misunderstood. The law doesn't require that you initiate contact with law enforcement or that you actively seek out ways to get help. Rather, it requires that you comply with reasonable requests for assistance when they're made. For an adult victim, this might mean providing a statement to investigators, testifying at trial, or helping identify other victims or trafficking operations. For a child victim, the expectations are appropriately lower and more protective. It's important to understand that your safety comes first. Law enforcement agencies generally understand that forcing traumatized victims to cooperate in ways that put them at risk would be counterproductive. In the United States versus Marcus, the court emphasized that cooperation requirements must be balanced against victim safety and well-being. Sometimes, law enforcement may be initially skeptical of trafficking claims, especially in cases involving labor trafficking or more subtle forms of control. This is where having experienced legal representation becomes crucial. We can help present your case in a way that helps law enforcement understand the trafficking elements and the value of your cooperation. Success in T visa cases often comes down to thorough preparation and compelling storytelling. We need to paint a complete picture of what happened to you, how it meets the legal definition of trafficking, and why you deserve protection under the U.S. law. This starts with your personal statement, your declaration, which should be detailed but not overwhelming. We want to show the progression of how you ended up in a trafficking situation, the specific acts of force, fraud, or coercion used against you, and the impact that this has had on your life. The statement should be in your own words, but constructed in a way that clearly addresses each legal requirement, and this is something that we will help you with. Expert testimony from psychologists or social workers who emphasize in trafficking can be incredibly valuable for your case. They can explain trauma responses that might seem inconsistent to someone unfamiliar with trafficking cases, such as why victims sometimes return to their traffickers or don't immediately seek help. Country condition evidence may also be relevant, especially for the extreme hardship requirement. If returning to your home country would put you at risk of re-trafficking, persecution, or other serious harm, we need to document those conditions thoroughly. Corroborating evidence from witnesses, medical providers, social service agencies, and anyone else who observed your situation can strengthen your case significantly. Even seemingly minor details can be important. Records show you weren't paid wages you were promised, evidence that your movement was controlled, or documentation of physical or psychological abuse. visa processing times have unfortunately been quite long in recent years, often taking 2 to 3 years or sometimes more. This is frustrating for clients and for attorneys too. We know our clients are anxious to get their lives back on track, but it's important to understand that USCIS takes these cases seriously and conducts thorough reviews. While your case is pending, you may be eligible for what's called continued presence if law enforcement certifies that you're a trafficking victim, and that continued presence would be beneficial for the investigation or prosecution. This provides temporary legal status and work authorization while you wait for your visa decision. If your case is denied, you have options. You can file a motion to reopen or reconsider with USCIS if there are grounds to do so, or you may be able to pursue other forms of relief depending on your circumstances. Sometimes cases are denied not because the person isn't a trafficking victim, but because the application wasn't prepared properly or didn't adequately explain how the legal requirements were met. visa cases are among the most complex immigration matters we handle. They require deep understanding of both immigration law and criminal law, sensitivity to trauma issues, and the ability to work effectively with law enforcement agencies. The stakes are incredibly high. Approval means safety and a path to rebuilding your life, while denial could return you to danger. Many trafficking survivors are initially reluctant to trust anyone, which is completely understandable given what they've been through. But trying to navigate the process alone puts you at a significant disadvantage. Immigration law is complex under the best circumstances, and visa law has many nuances that aren't obvious from reading the statutes. An experienced immigration attorney can help you understand where you qualify, how to gather the necessary evidence, present your case in the strongest possible light, and navigate the cooperation requirements in a way that protects your safety and interests. We can also connect you with support services and help you plan for the future, including the eventual path to permanent residence to a green card. If you believe you might be eligible for a visa, the most important thing is to seek qualified legal help as soon as possible. Time limitations and evidence preservation issues make prompt action crucial. Remember, you survived something that's incredibly difficult, and seeking legal protection isn't just your right, it's a step toward reclaiming control over your life. The visa program exists because Congress recognized that trafficking victims deserve protection and a chance to rebuild. You're not asking for charity or taking advantage of the system. You're seeking justice and protection that the law specifically provides for people in your situation. Today, we've covered the essential framework of visa eligibility, the application process, and what you can expect along the way. Understanding these basics puts you in a much stronger position to make informed decisions about your case and your future. But knowing the requirements is just the beginning. Successfully navigating the immigration system requires careful preparation and strategic thinking. That's exactly what we'll dive into in my next video. Visa and green card interviews preparation tips in 2025. Whether you're preparing for a T visa interview, adjustment of status interview, or any other immigration interview, the strategies I'll share could make the difference between an approval and denial. I'll walk you through the most common interview questions, how to handle difficult topics, what documents to bring, and the crucial do's and don'ts that even experienced applicants can overlook. This isn't generic advice. These are the specific techniques that can protect your case and maximize your chances of success. See you over there.